So it's Wednesday night before the big day, which means that they're blowing up the balloons in New York City.
They are.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So this is a different layout here. I haven't done this before. There's the regular one. So it's good and bad. The bad part has made me bigger, which is not. Maybe we could make this your side, the feature side. There's all kinds of the software uses. After a year and a half, I'm still figuring this out. Figured it out today, and may get to mess up on camera tonight trying to do a feature.
It's the live mess ups that make it all worth it, you know.
I suppose that's why my wife's out looking for my billfold right now. So that comes with that's when you get to my age where you can hide your own Easter eggs. It's good to see you, Augusta McDonald. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling better. Yeah, I was just out for about 5 days with just like coughing. It was just such a bummer. It was such a bummer, but feeling much better. So thank you for asking. However, my voice is lower tonight, a few octaves.
You could sing a different part for the.
Yeah, I can sing the bass now.
The baritone, if you need to.
Yeah.
It's good to have you back. And you had mentioned you're going to go do grocery shopping, you and the husband, tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to go tomorrow. So my dad drove down from Montana. So right now we're kind of in it. So Ryan and I, my husband and I, in Oklahoma City. I'm from Montana. I have a sister in Florida. So now we are the crossroads. So now we're hosting for Thanksgiving, which is fun. Nice. But we don't, we're totally last minute this year. So my dad brought a turkey from Hooterite Farm in Montana. So we've got a good bird, but everything else hasn't been bought yet. So we'll be doing that tomorrow. What about you?
Fry?
I think it's going to be in the oven. So roasted. I'm not the chef. Okay. I could find out, but I think it'll be baked or roasted, whatever.
We're doing one bake, one fry, and then nice. We'll see what happens. I'm the fryer, she's the baker. We'll see how this all works out. So yeah, I've got some family in Florida right now, and so earlier today, I'm going to go in and bring our first guest in.
Great.
He needs no introduction. Jeff Dismukes, who I had you muted. I can't believe I did that, Jeff Dismukes. So
yeah, most people try to mute me. It's
unsuccessfully, around. Hopefully.
Yeah,
so we taped Hot Seat today, and when I got up this morning, so yesterday I went through the drive-through at Oklahoma City County to get my flu shot, and so there was nothing wrong with my arm this morning when I got up. But anyway, I was sitting there on the sofa getting ready to go into News 9 this morning, and so Candace, I said, my back's kind of stiff. I haven't been moving enough, right? No walk the last couple of days. And then when I was taping with Disnukes earlier, and I got into the truck and started to come home, I was like, holy Moses, I figured this all out. Yeah. It's the flu shot thing, okay, which means it's working. And that's how I keep my keys. I lose my phone and my billfold all the time, but not my keys, because with getting vaccines, they stick to your neck. And so that's how that all works. That didn't go for no laughing about that one. But we did have Dismukes for Hot Seat, Augusta, and we were talking holiday blues. You've undoubtedly covered stories like this, Augusta and Jeff. But you know what? Now, just turn this over to the group. But Jeff tells me today, he goes, media does these holiday blues stories and suicide, but he goes, but this ain't the bad time of year.
Yeah, it always comes up this time of year. Everybody's always talking about this time of year, which is great. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, but it's actually not the time of year when you really see that spike in suicides. It's actually summer in Oklahoma. So it's going to be July and August. That's where you see the bigger numbers. But really what's happening here around the holidays is you have families that are together. Now there's stressors. That's the holiday blues. And when we talk about that, but you usually have people around, people are engaged. It's after the holidays when we typically see that. And across the country, it's around April or so. But for whatever reason in Oklahoma, it's the summer months where we really see our bigger spikes. Unfortunately, we have big numbers anyways in the state. And that's something we've been working towards and trying to bring down. So it's always a good time to be talking about this.
So for people who are, going home, I feel like a lot of stress or trauma might come from just interacting with family that you only see certain times of year, or stressful environments at home, or people experience loss, they kind of re-grieve over the holidays. I mean, what are some things that people can do?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I will tell you one of the biggest issues that really drives this feeling at this time of year that some people get. One, there's the time change, and that does make a difference. For some people, it's a real issue. I know it affects me, just those shorter days and all, but it's expectations. So I know a doctor who used to always talk about the different things out there. He says expectations that will get you, these unreasonable expectations. So you're trying to do everything, right? You're trying to make everybody happy. And so it's important to set back and be able to look at that and really kind of lay out a process. This is what we're going to do. Set your limits, know what those limits are. And what I was telling Scott, we were kind of talking about today, I have to have this conversation every year with my mother-in-law, these expectations that we're going to be everywhere, right? And we're going to do this, and hey, you got to remember I have family too. So, we're trying to do these different things, but it's about having those conversations. And when you're just being pulled on both ends and it gets too much, I think that adds to that anxiety and this depression. It's a seasonal thing, and it should be short-lived. It's when it goes beyond just a really short period, goes on beyond after the holidays. Really, I kind of tell everybody, if you're feeling this stress and pressure and depression for more than 2 weeks, it's kind of time to talk to somebody.
Right. And if you are clinically depressed and you don't get on a medication, even if you were maybe just experiencing some seasonal affective disorder, shorter daylight hours, stress, some kind of circumstantial, depression, if you don't get treated, it can snowball. I mean, there's, getting on like an easy medication, even for a short amount of time, can turn everything around. Yeah,
if you can get there. And that's why I'm always talking to people. If people ask, well, when do I know? Well, the minute you start having questions, ask somebody about it. If you start having any kind of concern, it's not going to hurt anything. You can talk to your primary care physician about it. You can talk to clergy. There's hotlines that you can call, and we talk about that. And we do talk about that this time of year, especially when we're doing the suicide prevention stories, which I'm very appreciative of. But there's actually a line that's a 24/7 line. It's a national suicide prevention lifeline. It's 1-800-273-TALK, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can call that and you can talk to a caring professional. And if there's a need, they can actually link you to services. Those calls come back and are actually answered here in Oklahoma when the calls are initiated from Oklahoma. Heartline 211 here in Oklahoma City gets those calls. And they're able to help you through really, really difficult situations.
Right. Help is available. And I think people can benefit from just knowing some of the kind of simple warning signs, just in reflecting on yourself. Am I feeling like purpose, like I don't have purpose, or just want to lay in bed? I mean, like, what are kind of those indicators of maybe affective or depression?
Yeah, and that's it. When you're going beyond some time to be talking to somebody, you don't get joy out of the things that you normally get joy out of. Your processes change. You have a feeling or problems with self-worth, and you start questioning, your worthiness in many ways. Tired all the time. There are several different things that kind of will make you want to reach out and find that right kind of help. And the right help is there. When you talk to people, it's not always easy. I always tell everybody sometimes we don't know where to turn. And if we haven't dealt with this before, we don't know who to call. It's one thing for me, I can pick up the phone and I know who to call, but I haven't always done that. I had to learn that over the years. I actually had an email from a gentleman today who was talking about, I saw something that you had done. You talked about reaching out. He said, but I've been reaching out and I can't get anybody to help me. He's calling private providers, and some of the private providers aren't taking insurance. Private providers, or they're not taking new clients. And that is something that you can run into. It's important not to give up, reach out. And I'm glad he called me, because we do have access to that and can help people through that on our website, odmhsas.org. There's a treatment finder there where you can find some services. And in our system, it works a little bit different. You can actually walk in a door and get an assessment and go from there. And we can even help refer you out into other areas if we need to. But it's important to ask, not to give up, and use some of those resources that are out there if you're having trouble finding what you need.
Absolutely. And I think it's so unfair to put it on somebody who's experiencing depression or experiencing some other sort of mental health issue to advocate for themselves. But that was my experience. I've struggled with depression all of my 20s. And now I'm on kind of like a minor antidepressant, but through different stages of my life, I had to learn how to advocate and go ask for help.
Right.
You know, is it the student learn? Is it like the student health center? Is it, wherever you're at? But the resources are there. They're in the community, and just start asking around, check in every day, just keep pushing until you get the care you need. Super important.
Right. And there are a lot of people out there who will help you navigate that system. There are people that we've experienced this, and we can kind of help you through it. It was scary probably for us also at first, but once you have a different understanding of what it is that really needs to happen, you can help somebody else. So it's important to be talking about this.
Truly.
Hey, Jeff, when you were talking about setting limits, is booze a problem right now this time of year?
Yeah, it absolutely is, because you're going to, parties, you overindulge, there are a lot of different things that are happening. That's something to definitely keep an eye on, and know that it can make those symptoms that much worse. Again, set reasonable limits there. And also, from my previous highway safety days when I was with NHTSA, it's important. Don't get behind that wheel when you're drinking. Have a plan, have a safe plan. Keep everybody safe during the holidays, not just you, not just your family. Keep other families safe also.
Absolutely.
Are you going to be in Stillwater Saturday?
I am not going to Stillwater Saturday. I'm hoping that doesn't add to my holiday stress.
Okay, well, just stand by here. Let me just bring in, because Jeff Dismukes is one of the world's biggest Sooner fans. And then there's the other side of the story. Okay.
Oh, no, that's just wrong.
So we didn't say anything tonight. We were going to be talking Bedlam, although I think I'm going to tweet that out. But the thing is that you've done 2 ball games this week, Joe.
Went to the basketball game on Tuesday night up at Gallagher-Iba, and then I'll be headed to Bedlam on Saturday.
Just wrong. Rush Springs is closer to Norman. Come on.
Hey, Jeff, I actually grew up an OU fan. One of my deep, dark secrets, and 4-H stole me away to Stillwater.
Stole you away.
How was that, though? Because you were going up there as a kid?
4-H Roundup. It's a great recruiting tool for OSU, and I think David Bourne did actually try to find a way to get 4-H Roundup in Norman instead of Stillwater, but just the ties with Extension, it was hard to make that happen.
Well, Dismukes, he's been around forever. Whenever we talked, and I want to say this to embarrass him a little more, because when I was doing it, I'm trying to figure out where the cameras are tonight. There's a new studio setup coming, and so I'm having problems with that. But I said, if there's a Mount Rushmore for people who've helped folks understand mental health and battle the stigma and come to an understanding, if there's a Mount Rushmore of Oklahomans who've done that, Jeff Dismukes' face is on that mountain.
No doubt.
Okay?
I appreciate
Dr.
it.
Krishna, Terry White, people like that. Dismukes is on that hill. Okay. And I would also say that, 20, 25 years ago when we first met, I didn't hold the same sort of understanding of the issue that I do now. And a lot of people go, I've always been here. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Okay. So one of the things that happens is that we learn. We're constantly learning. Science constantly changes what science tells you. And Jeff has been a great mentor in terms of helping me understand brain health and also the stigma that still exists, Joe. It still exists. So hats off to Disney. I told him he'd be on for 10 minutes. We'd kick him off and get him life back to normal. But I'm sorry that you're not going to go be joining. I actually am going to be there in Stillwater with an attorney friend. His last name may be Bonham. I'm not going to put him on the spot here, but nonetheless, I saw it was going to be chilly, and I'm like, who cares? I'll be in the box. So how that the crowd that you run in. So it was very nice from a friend of mine who said, hey, come up and watch this. And Joe, And Jeff in Augusta, he only had one thing he asked me. He was just, and don't wear red. So Bubby's sitting up by the OSU president in those boxes up there at those Oklahoma State donors and all those folks up there. I am not going to wear red. I'm not going to do orange. They said you have to wear orange, Joe, but I can't do red. So
I'll tell you, I share seats with another person that would probably be on that Mount Rushmore, and that's Steve Buck.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we will be hopefully celebrating and not having to to be each other's therapist at the end of the game on Saturday night. We'll see how that goes.
Well, I wish y'all luck, but I'm hoping my night goes better.
All right, so let me understand this, because I've not seen much sports this week. I've been in mourning since we lost to the Vikings this week. So if the Sooners win Saturday, it's a rematch the following week?
Yes, sir. I don't know if that's ever happened before. I can't remember that ever happening.
No, I can't think of that.
It's happened with us with Nebraska, and it's happened with us with Texas, but I don't think it's ever happened in Bedlam. So, all right, Jeff Dismukes, we're going to let you go. Thanks for that. Give us that number one more time before you head out for the evening.
Yes.
1-800-273-TALK. So that's 1-800-273-8255. Great line. Remember that number and call them if needed.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks a lot, y'all. Have a great evening.
Have a great
See you
Thanksgiving.
soon. Yeah, that's just one of the best people in the whole world right there.
Yeah.
He really, really is. Speaking of great people, Mr. Dorman. So I was telling you, there was a lot going on. You had something was going on Monday, which I can't recall. I'm old. But it was big news at OICA, and you're looking forward to the next session, right?
Looking forward to the next session is probably a strong term to use. We're looking forward to working with people to hopefully shape some better policies. And we did drop our legislative agenda on Monday for the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. And we've had some great response so far from some of the lawmakers. So we're hoping that some of these policies will be able to make it through the system.
Give us a peek.
So we addressed 4 different topics, and we'll see if I can remember them off the top of my head. First was mental health and physical health. So Augusta, thank you for sharing that story. I started talking to a therapist about a year ago, right around the beginning of the pandemic, and there is still a stigma, and I haven't been afraid to write about that in my column this year. We do need people to reach out and talk to a professional, open up about their issues. And I had issues going back to my early days, nothing major with my family, abuse issues, but just some traumatic events that really impacted me. And I didn't realize I'd been bottling them up all those years. And so it certainly helped me out. And I hope more people will talk to someone and that stigma can be reduced. But mental health and physical health are 2 of the big issues that we want to address. Right now, Matt Pinnell, the Lieutenant Governor of the state, is working to raise awareness on the health of children in the state. We know about the obesity issues, talked a little bit about mental health. There are a lot of things kids are going through, especially coming out of a pandemic. And so we want lawmakers to focus on those issues.
It's been a tough couple of years for kids. I've been covering some of the ways that the State Department of Ed is trying to put grant money in the right places to, provide for mental health support in rural areas where there just isn't for kids. I mean, everybody's talking about right now behavior issues in schools with kids having to sort of re-socialize and just having a really difficult time, especially in those transitional years where you had somebody in 7th grade or 8th grade, and now they're jumping into high school and they missed a couple of years of development. And it's just so unfair for kids, everything that they've gone through with the pandemic. So mental health support, re-socializing, absolutely super critical right now, because if they aren't well, if they don't have, a sense of balance and they're not kind of regulated, they're not regulating their emotions, they're not gonna be able to sit in a class and learn and, focus on the things that as kids, that's their job. They should just be learning what they learn in school.
You're exactly right. One of the issues we've been working on at the Capitol for the last several years is to reduce the number of suspensions we have, try to get these kids into a situation where instead of asking what did the kid do wrong or what's going on in their life, and find out why they're acting out. And I think you're going to get a lot further and have less trauma inflicted on that child just by punishing them. When you suspend these kids, you're teaching them that they're a bad person. And if you do multiple suspensions, I mean, there's been evidence to show that it can be a pipeline to prison in a lot of cases. And it starts out with just a simple school suspension. So we've got to do a much better job of how that happens. The State Department did implement a program called a counseling corps, where they're going to try and put more school counselors in the school buildings to help these kids out. Oklahoma actually ranks slightly better than average on the number of counselors we have in the schools. And this program that the State Department of Education is putting forth is going to significantly increase the numbers and reduce that counselor to student ratio. So we were very happy about that. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. I need to cough. Hey, Scott, come back for a second. I need to get a drink of water.
Oh, I can do this too. Boom. Just give her just a moment. So, and her beat's going to be is education. So while she's getting her drink of water, maybe this is
going to be stuck talking to me a lot. I'm sorry about that.
No, we were talking earlier about the flu shot kicked in this morning.
I appreciate your patience.
So, well, absolutely no problem this time of year. Any time of year, actually, for Augusta. So, it's the worst kept secret in town that this next gubernatorial election there's going to be a lot of discussion about education.
There will be.
And then there might even be a couple of candidates that might be squaring off before we've been on education. Joe Dorman, you know a little bit about gubernatorial campaigns. But let's
not put that PTSD on me from 2014.
No, you did everything that a person could possibly do at that time. The question I have for you is, we've seen Republicans or Democrats become Republicans. That's been going on for 20, 30 years in Oklahoma, right?
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time you remember a D or an R turning into a D?
Bob Weaver in the State House, Carol Rhodes in the State House, Nancy Riley in the State Senate about a decade after them. It doesn't happen very often. Then you see the flip side. You saw Johnny Tadlock in the House just a couple of years ago switch from a D to an R. And then you saw Mike Irvin back in 2002 do that. And then he lost his race for re-election to a political novice named Dan Boren.
Yeah. Well, I was more speaking of gubernatorial.
Yeah. In those higher level, you rarely see that. You saw Gary Richardson switch from an independent running back in 2002 to running as a Republican last time. But no, you don't see the switch between the two major parties.
Now, Vince Orza switched.
That's a good one.
Yeah. It's like a really, really long time ago.
But that brings up the exact reason why it's tough to switch parties. You may win a primary, but the hardline party people show up in the runoffs, and it's hard for a party switcher to win at that runoff. I mean, the only exception I can really think of that was truly a success story was Wes Watkins in Congress. Yeah, and he lost the gubernatorial race when he switched.
Came that close.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think a guy named Walters wound up taking that primary, didn't he?
Back then, I think you are correct.
Yeah. So there is Oklahoma history is replete with politicians going this way, the Republican way, but
right.
Do you think, and I just interrupted myself because I was about to make a nonsensical argument. We spent time today on Your Vote Counts, and the numbers that we got over the past week in terms of healthcare issues, that Commonwealth report.
Yes.
They're already fussing about Medicaid, the privatization, managed care rather, on Medicaid. That's already fussing. We've seen what happened this past week with the report on the lab. And I know a lot of Oklahoma State folks are glad to see it go into the lab. There's lots of problems. In fact, I think Dr. Monks has been tweeting a lot about it, going, this is the worst one in the country. So the issues dealing with healthcare, are they going to be as close as the education issues, in your opinion, when we get to the campaigns next year?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Greg McCourtney now being the floor leader in the Senate. Kim David was the driving force for managed care in the state legislature. And with her running for Corporation Commission and stepping down from the Senate floor leader spot, and then Greg McCourtney replacing her, who was probably the most ardent opponent to what was happening, along with Representative Marcus McIntyre, it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes through. But as far as healthcare, yes, I think there's going to be a good conversation. One of the things we're working on is trying to improve a SNAP benefit that's out there for consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. Double Up Bucks is one of those programs that incentivizes people who are on SNAP to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables rather than fried foods or canned items. And we've seen success with that in the private side with the funding that's gone in from foundations. So we're hoping there will be some state dollars going with that. Visiting with Democrats and Republicans alike, they all have been supportive of this to this point, just because they see different benefits that will come from that. So we're hoping something like that will go through. So the health conversation, I think, is going to be very important with looking at how Oklahoma has been ranking of late.
Can I ask you about incarceration issues? And let me take just a moment to just do just a bit of a tease here. So about 3 weeks ago, we had Commissioner Mon on. They were talking about some of the CARES Act money. CARES Act, if I recall, Joe, there was a different president then. And I guess Republicans were running the Senate and the House. So everybody voted for that money, the CARES Act money. So some of it's going into Oklahoma County. And of course, Tulsa has their jail, which is newer. And so they're both being compared. And then there was some pushback on the internal stuff. Now, I will tell you that I've known about and actually have been involved a couple of times in advising on lawsuits since that building was built, which is interesting. That building was built way back there by folks that had not done a correctional facility. Is when you go to the north side of the Capitol building there are some buildings. For the Oklahoma history fans, those buildings are the reason David Hall went to prison. And so for younger folks going, who is David Hall? He was a governor way back there. Well, anyway, that's not the exact same folks, but the building had some issues, as you know, and it looks like there's a real movement underway to get a new one, which is what's been said for a long time, just a poorly done building. But I went in and hats off to your colleague, Augusta Brittany Toulis, who went out there a few months ago and actually did a story. But I was, when I was hearing about this, Joe, I decided, well, I would like to go ask, because I asked, could I see some of the improvements they've made on the building? And I was hearing some folks saying or poo-pooing it. And so I went Monday, and actually a lot of the county folks let me go in there with my camera and toured the building and saw what we were dealing with. Let me give you some idea. This one, I would call it sort of like the NASA thing. That's where they're controlling everything. Over here in the left, you'll see I think this is the one that they look at all the systems, the air systems. So by the way, I saw photographs of before where the ductwork was never cleaned out. You know what would happen to your dryer if you don't ever clean out the lint filter, right? It was unbelievable. So this was one of the things that's happening right there. This is the system that they're putting in high-rise buildings now. They control everything. I think the middle one is dealing with these new locks. Speaking of which, this is one of what the new locks look like. You can see that that's been welded on there. It's real high tech. So a jailer comes out, corrections worker comes out, they can see if the people are in their cells. They no longer walk out there that they do things. They can jimmy the locks. That's all fixed now. This is an example of the system where they control it in one place, the air, the ventilation system. It was just kind of amazing to me. Now, not talking about the programmatic thing, but for folks who have been saying, the discussion about improvements being made at the jail is all hooey, it's not. I mean, there are some incredible things that are going. The pipes have been changed. You've heard the stories about the sewer backups. There are new systems in there crunching away on this. I mean, some of these things, when you see how that building was designed, they never even got the Sally port, the proper size for bringing in buses with prisoners. It's mind-boggling. But this CARES money that's been going into that building, and we're just talking about the physical plant. I'm talking about the programs inside of the building, but the physical aspect of that building is incredibly much better than it was. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. And so we're going to be spending some time. I'm going to take with a couple of commissioners. We got scores of these pictures, and I want them to kind of walk us through what's helped in the building. Now, the other side of that is what's going on in terms of how inmates are treated and things down the road. And I think, the hammer is dropping on that building's got to go. And that's what you're seeing from the Criminal Justice Advisory Council, Tim Tardibono, that group. There's some hurdles, but it looks like we could see a new jail in 2 to 3 years. Tulsa, on the other hand, newer building, but you see all of this. My bigger point is discussion is not just about what's happening at the Oklahoma County Jail. The discussion is what's happening with these kids early on that lead them to lives that they would be in those buildings, right? I mean, that's where this conversation has to start.
That's exactly right. And actually, I want to give a shout out to the Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth. They did a study that looked at the incarceration of minors in these county jails. And under federal law, you have to keep those kids completely separated from the adults to the point where they can't see or hear the adults. And only a couple of jails in the state are equipped to do that. And so we're having to look at adjustments all throughout the state of Oklahoma with all of these county jails to make sure that they can comply with federal law. So there will have to be dollars spent on that to make sure that that happens. And just looking at what we've seen, and of course, I know you know this, some of your viewers probably don't. The Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth and OICA were created as a result of the Terry D. lawsuit.
At the same time, right?
Yeah, we were created, both of us were created back in 1983, and people got together and decided there needed to be changes in the system. The juvenile justice arm of state government was separated from DHS at that time. That's where the problem began, because DHS was running these youth penitentiaries, and these kids were locked up in solitary. Horrific things were happening to them. And give a little bit of a plug for that. Bob Burke is writing a book about that with Terry Smith and Laura Choate, one of the plaintiffs from the Terry D. lawsuit. And that should be coming out in January. And so that's going to be a telling tale about what we saw in the state for decades under Lloyd Rader and that administration, and the changes that were brought forth because of that lawsuit. And while things have gotten better, we can't afford to backtrack. We've got to make sure that we have the right resources in place to help these kids get on the right path. Rachel Holt is doing a fantastic job at the Office of Juvenile Affairs, trying to change that away from a correction style system to more of a rehabilitative system. And before her, Steve Buck was doing the same thing. So we've seen some great changes that started in the Fallon administration that have been carrying forward. And I'm hoping that we will continue down that path and put the resources in place to help these kids get on the right path rather than end up in prison. I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you read it, about John Grant, the last person that was executed in the state. He was in the system undergoing all of those horrific acts before Terry D. And how can you expect a person to have their behavior adjusted to get out of that lifestyle and turn their life around when the abuse they're facing in the system is worse than what they had at home? And he was one of those that we lost. We've lost a lot of people just because of that abuse and neglect. And until we get the proper counseling resources out there, get the help to these kids, we're going to continue to see a lot of those statistics, just like you were talking about on healthcare. All of it ties together. Adverse childhood experiences, that study also came about in the 80s. It shows how childhood trauma will impact you mentally and physically into adulthood, leading to a lower life expectancy, higher issues with your heart, just multiple health conditions. And Oklahoma ranks #1 in the nation for multiple ACEs when you do the test of the 10 different things that can impact you with that.
Wow, heavy. That's heavy. So what are some of the like policy interventions that you've proposed for this upcoming legislative session that are anything specifically touching on this issue?
So with that, one of the things we would like to see is to administer the ACEs test during pediatric visits. And we would like to see it done with both the children who are there for the doctor's visit and also the caregiver. We want to find out if those adults have had those ACEs in their life and it's something they may have not dealt with. And we know that's going to be tough you can't force it, but if you can get people to voluntarily take it, it's almost like a veil is lifted when someone takes that ACEs exam, and they can see how many of those 10 things have impacted them. And it explains a lot of the generational trauma we see here in Oklahoma. It's well beyond trauma as a result of the weather we have. There are a lot of really hard things that have happened to people in Oklahoma through the years, between dust bowls, the weather that we face with tornadoes, floods, fires. You can go down the list, the bombing. Just so many things have happened to Oklahomans that have that resulting trauma that certainly you carry forward with you if you don't address that with some kind of mental health counseling service. And so if we can get that done, I think that will go a long ways to helping pinpoint where these kids need that help early on, get that intervention in place, and hopefully reduce their traumatic events and the resulting health conditions as they grow older.
Have you ever heard Dr. Gaddy's explanation of why occasionally we have some mean people here?
So
you heard this, the weather thing?
Augusta, you need to hear it. We actually have him speak. We do a conference in late January, early February called our Legislative Learning Lab. It's a 4-day conference where we do a deep dive into the legislative process. And it's great for beginners. It's a great refresher for those people who have been working in the system. But we'll talk about different aspects of Oklahoma politics and how to understand what happens at the Capitol. We start off the conference with a discussion from Dr. Gaddy talking about Oklahoma political history and how we got where we're at. I mean, it's just a fascinating conversation.
Okay, be sure to invite me to that. This is my first year covering the legislature in Oklahoma. I'll be at the Capitol this session, so invite me.
I certainly will.
You like my hat over my left shoulder there, Joe? Just wanted to kind of move
I almost wore an orange shirt and an orange jacket for you tonight. And I'm a little washed out. I think you may have done that on purpose in case I was wearing one.
It's okay. I'm sitting with Bonham Saturday night, so I'm sitting with the Prime Minister. So, have you got a few minutes? Can you hang for a few more minutes?
Absolutely.
I've got a couple of things I want to show. One of the things, do you remember Mike Ming when he was Secretary of Energy here in Oklahoma?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we had a conversation today. Mike Ming is, he's one of my friends from high school. A guy named Russ Harrison, who's always playing chess. Our buddies playing checkers, and I've had friends that I always liked hanging around with smarter people. I never really understood what they were saying, but Mike Ming is in that category. I mean, he see things from a global standpoint. And this is where I was going to say we're going to bring something in. I wanted you both to hear what he had to say about the Secretary Ming. Good afternoon. How are you? Oil reserve.
I'm good.
Listen to this real quick.
Ready for Thanksgiving.
Me too. You want to help us understand that's happened this week in the energy markets? The president has said he's going to pull reserves out of the emergency oil reserves out. He's asking OPEC to drill up more gas and oil, and the policies haven't been exactly friendly to that. But maybe we just need to start at home plate, try to get to first base. Secretary Ming, what's going on here? And for consumers, as we watch this, is it going to make any difference over the holidays, the next few months, or is this just all theater?
So the withdrawal from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is somewhat of a mystery. But if you go back a little bit further from that, the problem that we have wasn't unexpected. And what's happened, even before COVID, the world needed and needs more energy, not less energy. We're trying to push an energy transition, which by all accounts, has the right objectives. But we've found in 2021, coming out of the pandemic faster than we thought we would, that we had significantly underinvested in energy and energy systems and infrastructure. And all of a sudden, 2021, especially in places like Europe and China, has made us realize we probably weren't ready to make some of the decisions we had made. We didn't have the end game in place before we started taking options off the table. And so that's where we are today. We really ramped back drilling. We ramped back global investment in oil and gas. And I don't want this just to be about oil and gas. We by and large ramped back investment in a lot of things. And now it's coming home to roost. And we've got to go find this energy. And unfortunately, what's happened in 2021 is the fallback position is we went back to some of the most carbon intense forms of energy, especially coal in China and again in Europe. And so we haven't just sort of stalled, we've gone backwards here because we didn't do things smart. We weren't having the right conversations. We weren't talking about the right things. We weren't talking about optimizing the resources that we have, the tools that we have available to us. That's where we need to get to.
So I'll take him down. That was so basically the bottom line on this, Joe and Augusto, was this is really not going to do anything. Going to the strategic reserves, gas prices are coming down. He really is critical of President for talking about doing the investigations on this. But when he was talking about taking options off the table, he's talking about EVs. And the fact that some of these car companies are saying we're not going to be building car, we're not going to be doing internal combustion engines in the future. So to do that, one of the reasons I brought this up, and I'll put this on Mitchell Talks, this entire interview, which runs about 10 minutes, is that we're going to do a series, about a 7-part series starting in I think next week, where he's going to walk us through the fundamentals, the old baseball book, the old baseball movie with Kevin Costner, Bull Durham. You got to throw the ball, hit the ball, catch the ball. From that, about what's really going on. And we have an incredible energy secretary in Oklahoma named Ken Wagner. And Joe, you know him, and working right now on hydrogen. Maybe Oklahoma becomes one of the biggest hydrogen producers in the country. That study's going on right now. The old days of the oil and gas guys hating on the renewable guys, it's over. And there's still some lingering annoyance, but those days are over. We got to do everything. That's the way it works. So that's coming up, and I wanted you to hear that when it's so Republicans criticizing a Democrat's no big deal, but I mean he really doesn't take time to do that except whenever you see something that's kind of egregious. And Wall Street's not letting people sink a lot of money into oil and gas right now. It used to be a wildcatters game. Now it's a money game. What's my return going to be on this rig? And so that's why you don't see them sprung up all over the prairie right now in Oklahoma. So you understand that business, Joe. So.
Well, need to look back to Chris Bingen and I both worked on legislation to put the CNG pumps at different fueling ports, at different gas stations throughout the state. And you really have a chicken and the egg problem with a lot of these vehicles that are run by alternative fuels. You got to make sure the resources are there throughout the state to ensure that there is ability to fuel back up. And so there is going to be an investment that is required from that. And I know you've driven by my house. I put solar panels on my house earlier this year. We've got to look at these different forms of energy if we're going to be serious about this and look at ways to carry on for future generations, because a lot of this stuff is not going to be there in 2 or 3 generations. So we've got to find ways to make sure that these opportunities are funded, that the technology is there. It took us forever to get there with wind, and there's still some argument about wind, but we've got to continue that investment. When we talk about the wind come sweeping down the plains, we've got to make sure that we have those opportunities in place.
Mm.
Well, there was a lot of people try to put wind to sleep. It's not going to happen. And I mean, the renewables are here. They're not going anywhere. So that's a tough old deal. And one more thing. Augusta and Joe, that I wanted to play for you. Many of you know one of the most incredible women in this country runs a bank in Edmond, Citizens Bank Edmond, Jill Castilla, who's just one of the greatest people in the world, and her husband, and they are Army people. We've had many great exchanges about this time of year. My dad's Army guy, and
The chairman.
yeah, the chairman. And he was, Dad was in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, the Berlin airlift. I mean, all these things were going on when he was in reserves. And of course, there's some interesting things going on right now with the Guard between the governor and the president. We won't get into that tonight. But nonetheless, Jill Castilla's family has been Army. Oldest son was at West Point, and people know, you look over my shoulder, you see the Packer helmet, that I'm a Lombardi fan, and I think Vince is somewhere in the back there. But anyway, Vince Lombardi was at West Point and under Red Blake, and one of the reasons Vince Lombardi didn't get to the pros very early on because he was Italian. There was so much racism against Italians in the 50s. He didn't get his break very early on. Well, he was at Army. And so Jill and I have talked. She said, you've got to see a game at West Point. The Sooners were up there a few years ago. But I remember Lombardi saying in his memoir that David Marinus wrote, it was the biography about him was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen in terms of a football game. So not surprisingly, she has children, Jill Castilla, that want to follow and do public service. Not surprising considering Jill and her husband. That's what they've given their life to. And Olivia, her daughter, was looking at going to West Point, and then she was back this week. I had a conversation with her because I was thinking, we have awkward conversations happening tomorrow around tables, everything from vaccine, and in Oklahoma, orange versus red. Okay. But one fascinating conversation that I wanted to kind of end with tonight was, what if your daughter makes a choice between Army, and she had another school she was looking at a very prestigious school, but then she started looking at Naval Academy, Army, Navy. All right, you're familiar with the rivalries, Augusta. And so Olivia Castilla decides to go to the Naval Academy, and not just the Naval Academy. She goes there to cheerlead as well, and she's involved in hunting gin social clubs, and she's sort of like recruiting for Navy. And so I was thinking, what an interesting conversation that's going to be at lunchtime on Thanksgiving, where the midshipman is sitting with all of these Army folks, and they're having the conversation at lunch. So I had a conversation with Olivia, and it's really short, but I think this is like such an uplifting, fun little interview. Here it is. I want to welcome our next guest is Midshipman Olivia Castilla. And if she looks familiar, if you know her mom and dad, then you understand. And of course, by the way, Jill Castilla is our banker at Mitchell Talks. And I don't touch any of the money. That's the CEO, Candace Mitchell, who does all the dealings with Jill Castilla. Olivia is her daughter. Your mom and dad, both Army, your brother Army, and you wound up at the Naval Academy. Olivia, good to have you. How are you?
I'm great. It's very interesting to point out. It's like I'm the black sheep of the family pretty much at this point. Makes Thanksgiving dinner going to be a lot of fun this year talking about that.
So I thought it would be fun to talk to Olivia because she's at Annapolis and back home. She's had some great adventures as a sophomore, but I think most people don't know this. Maybe a lot of people do, but I didn't. You're a cheerleader for the Naval Academy, and you pointed out that you could have a better record at 2-7. But all things are forgotten whenever that you play Army. And so you've been to Army, Navy on the Army side. Is this going to be an awkward Thanksgiving? You've had one with family since you went to Naval Academy, but to have a dinner conversation with the Castillas, all these Army veterans, and someone from the Naval Academy, their daughter, how is this going to be amongst the most awkward Thanksgiving dinners I could ever imagine? Right? How does that go? How's that going to go?
I mean, it's always filled with debate. Like, my grandpa gets really into it because he also served in the Army. Pretty much everybody in my family is Army. But I'm diehard Navy all the way. Even whenever we lost last year, Christmas was fun. Everyone bringing that up left and right. Like, oh, Army, Navy, we didn't go as planned this year. And I was like, well, we'll get them next time. So hopefully, it's not too heated. But I know that it's gonna definitely, it definitely stirs the pot and it keeps things interesting at the table. So it's gonna be good. And then cheering last year, Army Navy. I think my mom had like a Navy jacket and then an Army shirt underneath, so they're adjusting as best as they can to whatever I'm doing, and then everybody else in my family. So it's not that bad.
Well, there will be a lot of awkward lunches in the next 48 hours in Oklahoma because of what's going to happen Saturday night. But tell us how that you came to be at the Naval Academy with your family with such Army history. And there's so many people, so many students that are coming home to Oklahoma over the holidays. I think this is an interesting story, and that you're really coming back into, it's not enemy territory, but Army Navy. So how did you come to be at Naval Academy?
So I've always known that I wanted to serve, and I was either going to do that. Actually, I wanted to go to West Point first, got in, took a visit, was not a fan of being in the middle of nowhere, even though it's beautiful, but it just wasn't for me. And then I applied for ROTC scholarships. Thank my lucky stars, I got all of those. Was thinking about going to Columbia for a little bit, but ultimately, whenever I visited the Naval Academy, met the actual people, was introduced to the cheer program in their Chinese department, I just really fell in love with it, and I couldn't say no whenever they accepted me. And they've just given me so many opportunities. Like, I'm going to be studying abroad in Taiwan this summer, and I got to sail all the way to Connecticut from Annapolis last summer. So I think it was the best decision I could have made, and definitely out of pocket from the Army tradition that I'm from, but everybody's been really supportive of my family, regardless of the big Army Navy game that is upcoming.
Okay, so I find it interesting about some of the things that you've done, one of which was you toured China a few years ago. You're talking about this next step being in Taiwan. That's geopolitical hotspot right now. As a member of the United States Navy, you know that China's trying to build their Navy. They're trying to be the number one superpower in the world, military superpower. From your standpoint, as a young student at Naval Academy in 2021, watching, and you have a family that's involved in business, so you understand the geopolitical aspect of this. From your vantage point, and even what you're studying right now, what sort of insight can you give us as to what's going on?
So there's definitely tension that's happening right now. I can't really speak too much on that, but I think it's pretty well known that there's tension between not only China and Taiwan, but just America and everybody, and especially China right now. But the Navy especially is doing a really good job of not pushing our limits, but just like the program that I'm going through in Taiwan. It's not really for any sort of government aid or like any sort of trying to get information from them. It's more just we're bringing our people here to like learn and integrate them into this so that they can become better soldiers and better officers in the future by having that perspective of going to another nation and learning about their customs, courtesies, language. I think that that's really appreciated. Like people of Taiwan really appreciate that we're taking the time to learn their language, to learn their culture. It makes everything a little bit more humane, in my opinion, that they learn English just like us, and then we're taking our time to also learn Chinese. So even though it's amongst this high tension and high pressure like situation, I think that us taking the effort to learn about each other really brings it back down to the ground and builds a better and more solid foundation for us to become better allies and cooperate in the future better.
I gotta tell you, I loved the interview, and when I think about the hands that our nation is in, first off, what a great job Marcus and Jill have done with their children. But did you hear that? I mean, she's in the Navy. She's serious about this, okay? And she goes, and I'll put this on Mitchell Talks the entire interview. She wants to be in a submarine, okay? So she's a cheerleader, but she's submarine. I mean, we're talking about a boat underwater with nukes. She's a serious young lady. But did you hear the diplomatic core in her?
Can we just elect her governor right now?
It's pretty incredible, isn't she?
That was fantastic to hear. Uplifting.
very uplifting. And I mean, her parents can only be so disappointed. She's still at the Naval Academy. Like, I get the rivalry. I 100% get the rivalry. But, you know, she's good for her. She's an asset to the community.
So I'll put that entire interview up. Also, Secretary Ming's interview went about 10 minutes, and I don't want to give all of it away. Also, we'll be talking about the jail thing next week, a tour about that. But I've got to tell you that I just wanted to end with Olivia. It was just something that when I was listening to the wisdom, and there was no jingoism there, no, we're going to come get you. That's a diplomat who also is going to be running a boat and probably running a government at some point in her life. But I thought you'd both enjoy that.
We did enjoy. Thank you for sharing that. My younger sister went to the Coast Guard Academy, and I have to say she came from very rural Montana and developed into just like a really wonderful global perspective. And now she's going into, she's flying planes or helicopters or something, and she's just developed into this like wonderful young leader. I mean, that's a cool opportunity. So yeah, her mother needs to layer the Army and the Navy, and proud of her. Yeah,
that's winter all the way around. Which, by the way, in Clancy's book Hunt for Red October, do you remember where the first officer in the Soviet that was defecting wanted to go after they took the boat and they defected?
I don't remember.
Montana.
Oh, let's all defect to Montana. Yeah.
You think they'd let me go to? Anyways, he's killed at the end of the movie. He says to the captain, he goes, "I would have loved to have seen Montana." Okay, well, the king of worthless trivia strikes again. So, Augusta, good luck tomorrow in the grocery stores.
Oh, thank you.
That's going to be fun. It's going to be great fun.
We did this to ourselves. We'll take our hits.
The clothes are gone. The Dr. Pepper's gone. I think that maybe the bologna is gone, but good luck to you. And Joe, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation.
Our conversation about incarceration, and as people may have noted, we're going to spend some time on this issue, not just about the incarceration aspect of it, but we have so many, the ACEs, and what we want to do is build a system in the state where people don't go to those buildings.
Right.
But in the meantime, we're going to cover what's going on there. I know that's not something, and as I was telling Augusta that when I was researching this week, that Brittany Toulis had done, basically when I talked to people down there, Augusta, I said, has anybody done this? And they said, Brittany did that a few months ago.
Yeah. We'll get her on. Yeah.
I'd love to have her perspective of that, because what I saw the other day is I saw, like that big screen I was looking at. I'm going, now this is not the old days. I mean, they have made improvements. Now it's a horrible building, but right now there are about half the people there were, say, 10 years ago. So there are improvements. So you can't deny that. That's happening. Now, it may not be as fast, and the programs may not be as great. So there's always room for improvement, and a lot of improvement. But you want to give people their due when they do actually say they're doing something, and there's video evidence that it's being done. You want to stick to the data. Yeah, this is happening, but there's so much more to cover. And right back with what's happening at OICA in our education system, which just happens to be Augusta's beat. And I don't know if you can give the secrets away, but you've got some pretty good series coming up. I don't know that you can confirm that. The rumor tells me that there's some good series coming from you, Augusta.
Yes, there is a great series coming. For anybody out there who's interested in how school districts are spending their pandemic-related federal funds and the spending solutions they are coming up with to address mental health for kids and food insecurity, which was a huge issue during the pandemic, and infrastructure and unfinished learning. So it's going to be kind of a little bit of a niche conversation, but I think critical for districts. We'll be hearing from lots of leaders within the State Department of Ed and district leaders around the state about, this is like kind of a once in a lifetime, big historic amount of money that's being dumped into our public schools. And I think it's just a really critical moment for schools and communities to find ways to spend that money well, because it'll make all the difference. If it's done well. So we're talking to Superintendent of Public Instruction Joy Hoffmeister for I think 3 of the 6 episodes. Their federal programs administrators, special needs administrators, and then districts that are coming up with solutions to address the kids in their classrooms that have developed very individualized needs coming out of the pandemic. So it should be interesting for any of the education policy or nerds out there, or parents who want to know how this money is being spent. Some schools are getting over $100 million. So it's quite a moment for schools to really do some interesting things.
It's going to be interesting in 2022, which is coming up. I think that the worst kept secret in town, and here's my earliest New Year's prediction. There's going to be a lot of investigation about how this money is being spent. Your series, Augusta, but you've seen there are people want to know about communications. We've seen that recently. I mean, you hire these communications firms. What were they doing with the money? How effective were they? The Pandemic Center up in Stillwater. What are they doing with the money? How's it being spent? CARES Act money, the ARPA money, which is coming. There's a lot of it. We had Logan Phillips on last week. Early on, he was saying he thought when this all began, maybe a year ago, there'd be 40 million or so. He's like, now he's looking at, he said, maybe close to $250 million in money that's coming to Oklahoma. So for the infrastructure aspect. So there's a lot of money. And I know the Democrat Republican aspect of that, about what we can or cannot afford. Generally, that happens whenever you've got both houses of Congress, but I digress. Nonetheless, that's coming. So we'll be looking forward to your series, and that's going to be a good one. It really is. And Joe, what's next for you?
We're working to try and get these bills filed from our legislative agenda. The bill filing deadline is December 10th, and so we want to try and get as many of those into the hopper as possible with the lawmakers that will carry them forward. We've had great success so far visiting with some of the members on both sides of the aisle, both chambers, looking at these issues. So I'm optimistic, but I'm always optimistic at the beginning, and then we just have to work hard to make sure that we can meet those goals. And this is going to be a tough year with it being an election year. We know there will be a lot of politics at play and the hypersensitivity of what we're seeing out there with far too many people. The April filing deadline, it's going to be telling. If there were a lot of candidates filing for office, there's no telling how the session will end up. If we don't have a lot of interest from people looking at running for the legislature or those statewide offices, it could be a pretty boring election year. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Well, best of luck on everything you're doing.
Absolutely.
And we count on both of you to be a part of that. We appreciate you both.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure.
Feelings mutual. Well, thanks to our viewers tonight. We enjoyed the program. I hope you enjoyed the program. Always thanks to Augusta, who brings so much to this program.
Oh,
and there's so much we have to talk about each week, and we want to try to make sure that these tidbits of these longer interviews are there for you to see. We'll post Olivia's and the Mike Ming on Mitchell Talks. And in the future, hopefully we'll have a good saturation with these videos, because there's not many places where we can go get those long, in-depth discussions and interviews, and looking forward to that, especially looking forward to Augusta's series. So in the meantime, happy Thanksgiving, travel safe, be nice. You're going to be sitting across the table from people in orange. People in orange are going to be sitting across there, people in red, perhaps Army, Navy people. So
whatever the fight is. Yeah.
Whatever the fight is. All right. From our house to yours, happy Thanksgiving. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Happy Thanksgiving.